Television, the decimation of the nuclear family. In 1925, the world was forever changed. A young inventor, John Logie Baird, debuted images of silhouettes in motion. At a paltry 30 lines of resolution and 12 frames per second, a moving human face was barely recognizable. In 1928, Baird and his company, the Baird Television Development Company / Cinema Television, launched the first transatlantic television signal. History was made. Early televisions were radios that would show spinning nip-cow discs. This furthers Bolter's idea of remediation, that as technology replaces the technology before it, it retains elements of the previous incarnation. In the 1930s, televisions were sold with cathode ray tubes. These TVs came with no sound outside of the radio, a gigantic 3-inch screen, and a whopping $125 price tag, which in current dollars would be the equivalent of about $1,900. Then the Second World War hit, and the manufacturing of televisions was halted. Following the war, the halt was lifted and television exploded. In 1946, less than 0.5% of Americans had television sets. Within 8 years, 56% had. And by 1962, over 90% of American households had televisions. A revolution. Unlike much of the technological change that has faced people over time, television hasn't faced the challenges of the other technologies. Unlike the cell phone or computer, when television began, it did not require a secondary service for access. Channels were free for everyone who had an antenna or rabbit ears. The access to television programming was unfettered, thus creating an open forum to interaction with television. Like the radio before it, the television was only limited by its hardware cost. Once the actual machine was purchased, programming was free, unlike the computer or telephone, which requires a service provider. Unfortunately, over the last 20 years, this has shifted, as new digital television requires a service provider. This has resulted in a slight decline in television, as 96.7% have at least one television in their home, down from almost 99% 5 years ago. Therefore, access to television has decreased slightly over the last few years, but it is still the most accessible of the three technologies. According to Neil Postman, television essentially has destroyed the childhood of Americans since the 1950s. Television requires no additional thought. It is spoon-fed to the masses, who consume it unknowingly. Moreover, television is often inappropriate for consumption, yet children sit there longer and longer each day. The problem with this is that it leads to the downfall of literacy. The icons and images viewed on the television replaced the need or desire for language. The consumer of information became used to visual representations of information as either a supplement to written language or replacing written language altogether. Not only is the language replaced by visual images, many others, including Newman, state essentially that television has displaced the written word. Every hour spent watching television is an hour not spent reading. This is an oversimplified argument, but it does have some limited merit. If language is viewed as a skill, then displacement theory limits our ability to practice. In addition, given the nature of television, it is next to impossible to reinforce learning of literacy with the television. As Postman states, you can't share ideas with a TV. Not everyone believes that television is detrimental to literacy. Although Postman may state television leads to children entering school with a bias, many others believe television can be used to promote literacy. Considering the average Canadian watches 26 to 30 hours of TV each week, promoting literacy is important. Some people believe the use of closed captioning can help promote learning and literacy by having children read along as they are entertained. In addition, some others believe that television has improved teachers as well. It is a somewhat common belief that television has resulted in students needing more entertainment. This has caused teachers to revise and improve their practice in order to reach all students. However, According to the American Academy of Pediatrics, there are rules which need to be implemented to ensure viewing is educational. First, the viewing must be appropriate for the age grouping. This is why children under the age of 2 should not be watching any TV. Any value is wasted. If children watch TV, it needs reinforcement from adults. Learning will develop greater meaning if adults discuss the learning with the child. Moreover, television viewing needs to be structured and never occur near bedtime. Although television can be used to promote literacy, it fails in most ways. Children watch too much TV and TV that is not appropriate. Even Sesame Street, which has been lauded as the premier television show for children, does not promote literacy properly and, in fact, leads to lower reading ability in students compared to students who just read and didn't watch television. Part of the problem is that educational television is a big commercial project. Although somehow people believe that, even though we recognize we watch too much TV, that television is still as educationally sound as reading. In an attempt to justify our consumption, we have fooled ourselves into believing that television is simply beneficial. Postman stated, "We are amusing ourselves to death," meaning our entertainment mediums have taken over our lives. Given the fact that we watch 30 hours of TV a week, and then that in most households the TV is on all day long, whether or not it's being watched, maybe Postman wasn't that far off. And that doesn't even consider the way television has impacted our social interaction. Social interaction is something that is heavily influenced by television, especially for younger people. The impact of the television, given its permeation into the psyche of children, is unparalleled. Unlike literacy, the impact of television on interaction is not all negative or foreboding. Television can be an extremely positive influence on the development of compassion, empathy, and friendship. Everyone knows what it feels like to be lonely, and has been privy to that at one time or another. But it is especially hard on children. As research shows, television can actually help. According to a 2009 article, watching television can fend off loneliness. No friends? TV can help. Dumped by your significant other? TV can help. Watching television delays feelings of loneliness. The background conversation coupled with the dynamics of a different relationship allow the viewer to escape their reality for at least a little while. The best part? The feeling can last for hours. To a further extent, television can not only delay or negate feelings of loneliness, but can also create false friendships as well. Not those kind of friends. These kind of friends. Research into the impact of television on social interaction has demonstrated some peculiar findings, including what is known as social surrogacy. Friendships form between the viewer and the fictitious character, albeit one-sided friendships. They develop over the same time frame as real friendships and can be felt as fiercely as real friendships as well. The characters become important figures in a person's life. This may seem like it would lead to stalking, but it can have very positive benefits as well. In addition to less loneliness, it can also be used to teach and model proper interaction and societal norms. However, it should be noted through research that surrogacy limits real interaction and could, at least potentially, cause greater problems in the future. Another related positive of television interaction is the modeling of empathy and understanding, especially to children and young students. Research has shown that when children are exposed to positive situations, they respond accordingly. When students are shown people of various races intermingling in positive ways, it lessens feelings of segregation, regardless of background situation. Essentially, this means that when shown the proper way to interact, children will emulate that interaction, regardless of preconceived ideology. This could be used to eliminate racism. Along the same vein, television has also been used to teach children about the society around them and has been used to further human rights. From civil rights through the Vietnam War to the Twin Towers, television has broadcast world events and brought them into our homes. The medium has educated us about the world around us and the struggles we face at home. Perhaps no other technology has brought us closer in our universal struggles than the television. It has also drawn us closer as humans, creating what was once coined as the global village. Through understanding and icons, we have overcome oppression to unite. The advent of the television has led to a rise of nationalism in countries because it broadcasts what is happening across the country, thus creating a sense of unity. We sympathize with our neighbors in a way never seen before. Unfortunately, not all the social interaction which occurs in relation to the television is positive. There are many detrimental communications as well. According to Postman, television steals childhood away. Children who watch a lot of television are less creative than those who read, because by providing visual images, the imagination is not as evolved in a child who is undulated with imagery. This stunts the visceral growth of an imagination. Think back to your childhood. Did it involve playing and using your creativity, or were you plopped in front of the boob tube where you wasted countless hours on mindless drivel? Another byproduct of the stolen childhood is a lessened attention span. Although research is non-conclusive, many believe that the hours in front of the television has created a growth in the children diagnosed with attention deficit disorder. Proponents against this idea cite a better understanding of intellectual adolescent growth as the reason for increased ADD diagnoses. This lack of creativity has caused children to struggle when interacting with one another. A startling outcome of the rise of television is what is known as CSI syndrome. Simply put, CSI syndrome is a lessening of sensitivity to violence and gore. The value of human life has decreased, partly because by the time they're 12, the average child has viewed 8,000 murders, and by the time they're 18, they will have witnessed 200,000 violent acts on television. There's no proof that increased images of violence has led to the increased violence, but it does seem that children are desensitized to violence and more prone to violent acts. However, it should be noted, increases in poverty, substance abuse, etc. play into increased violent instances as well. Television violence has led children to believe that violence is an acceptable solution. A similar problem is sexuality. Far too many children associate their first exposure to sex with television. At one time, sexuality was taboo. Elvis Presley was unable to be shown below the waist on the Ed Sullivan Show because it was too suggestive. Now nudity and sexuality are a daily occurrence. The astronomical amounts of sexuality on television has led many to wonder its impact on the interaction of children and teens. Although research on this subject is not as prevalent as one would think, the limited research shows that television has led teens to believe that multiple partners is acceptable, nudity acceptable, premarital, extramarital intercourse acceptable, and they have unrealistic views on contraception. The birds and the bees now come from the idiot box, not their parents. Teens and children's views of sexuality and each other's have changed, leading to all sorts of new issues surrounding media exposure, and television, well, it may have been the catalyst. Increased television viewing has also led to psychological problems and addictions. Drug use and drinking looks cool on TV, leading to increased consumption among teens. Underage drinking has risen almost exponentially over the television era. It is estimated 77% of shows on television have drinking on them or reference drinking in some way. This is troubling for children and teens. In addition to drinking and drug use, television itself has become addictive to many. Numerous children are left lifeless and lethargic after the television's shut off. This also results in poor education for students, lending credence to Postman's charges. The television ushered in a new era. It created the idea of a new, global village. Society became intertwined and interconnected in a way we had never been before. Television infiltrated virtually every household. It became the new dinner table. When television was first pushed in the 1950s, it was marketed as a tool to draw families closer. Yet the television seems to drive families apart. Ironically, the wholesome image of family is now only seen on the object that caused the deconstruction in the first place, the television.